oxygen, okay?
Okay.
This will help you breathe a little bit better.
Well,
Yeah. Okay, we'll take his blood pressure. Okay, hon, we're just gonna give you a little squeeze on your arm.
Janet, here's your dad. Why don't you come over here? Vaughn, here's your daughter.
I was just gonna start the IV. You wanna do
Okay.
it? Here's your tourniquet.
All right, we're almost done. I'm just getting your labs. And like I said, the doctor will be able to tell what's going on with you once we get these back. It's very early, so if there's damage, hopefully we can correct it as quickly as possible.
Morrison?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Dr. Casuto. What's going on? What brings you into us?
well, I was mowing the lawn, and then all of a sudden I wasn't, you know. I just
What were you feeling?
I had a tight pain in my chest, you know,
Uh-huh.
knot.
Why don't you sit up for a second? Let me take a listen to your back. I need you to take some deep breaths for me, okay? Hold on. I'm gonna start
Just wait a
slow back
second.
here.
I can still do it.
Go ahead, deep breath. Nice and easy, not too quick. We're a little bit worried about your story, just as you are. It sounds like you're feeling better now, but we want to run some tests, all right? So we're going to send off some blood tests that will look to see if if your heart was hurt in any way. We're going to get a chest X-ray and an EKG, and we'll try to put it all together and see what's going on.
Mrs. Bryan, your doctors asked me to speak to you to tell you about a test that we're going to do. It's absolutely routine. We offer it to every pregnant woman. We take some blood and we measure certain substances in the blood, and they can tell us about the way the baby's spine is developing, or also whether the baby might have a chromosome abnormality.
What do I need to do? What if it's abnormal?
Then we would do further tests to see what else we could learn, and we could possibly offer you an amniocentesis also.
Well, I'm glad we could talk today because we have to talk about what Randy needs next. And with his liver disease and with biliary atresia, we've really exhausted every other means of caring for him except for a liver transplant. The good news is that that is life-saving therapy. And for children who are not on life support, the chances are that he'll survive. The survival rate is about 95% at 1 year, but about 5% of the children don't make it. And I think for you to get your mind ready for what Randy faces, you'll have to realize that Randy could be one of those 5% of the children who don't survive the treatment.
Facing life and death. 3 patients who need care. And that care is a partnership. Every day, physicians rely on clinical chemists to help them interpret test results, make a diagnosis, decide on treatment. Every day, 2/3 of all samples drawn for medical analysis end up in the clinical chemistry laboratory. Was Vaughn's discomfort a heart attack? Are there chromosome abnormalities in Jennifer's developing baby? Will Randy's liver transplant be successful? These are the questions. These are the clinical chemists who will help provide answers. And this is their story.
Cookie, can you get these labs, please? Complete
We'll take
cardiac profile.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We just need you to
Thank
relax
you.
a little bit, okay? And then we're gonna hook you up.
From the emergency room, Vaughn Morrison's blood is quickly transported to the lab by pneumatic tube and centrifuged. Then, the blood is ready to be tested.
Make sure we've got at least 50.
Clinical chemist Dr. Larry Krishka will interpret the results when they're ready.
Finish that one. What we're going to do now with this blood sample is analyze it for creatine kinase and for the creatine kinase isoenzyme CKMB. And then based on the results of these tests, we are going to be able to perhaps rule in or rule out an acute myocardial infarction in this patient.
Acute MI, myocardial infarction, or heart attack, diagnosed by analyzing the levels of certain enzymes and other substances in blood. Interpreting test results is just one part of a chemist's work.
The role of the clinical chemist is very varied. It can be developing the tests, it can be evaluating the tests in the routine clinical setting to make sure that the claims for the clinical utility of the test are in fact true.
The triple screen to be run on Jennifer's blood will test to see if certain chromosome abnormalities exist in the child she carries. The screen tests for 3 different substances: AFP, HCG, and free estriol.
Those 3 tests were selected because from our experience over time, we found that by looking at this one question in 3 different ways, we were able to get a different piece of information from each observation, and that all taken together, that gave us the best laboratory picture of what was going on. It's akin to
Clinical
using
chemist
the
Dr.
several
Wendell
senses of the
O'Neill
body.
has 30 years' experience in laboratory science.
Interested in a patient, I got a call on the AFP on patient number 80972. Do you have that result yet?
Yes, there he is.
Okay.
This is this patient you're looking for.
Mhm.
Yes,
80972?
72, yes.
Right, okay. And that AFP is what? It's a little bit lower than you would expect for that age and that stage of pregnancy, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
For me, this field was the perfect marriage of science and medicine. It was an opportunity to indulge in those things that I found academically interesting and challenging, the science of it, the challenge of solving problems and answering questions, and applying that in a context that made a difference.
1 month after the transplant decision is made, a young donor is found. Randy Klosek will get a new liver. The surgery takes 8 hours. Randy is put on the immunosuppressant drug cyclosporin to prevent rejection. So powerful is cyclosporin that its levels must be closely monitored. Levels that are too high can lead to toxicity and death. Heading the monitoring effort is Dr. Barbara Goldsmith, a specialist in pediatric clinical chemistry.
How are things going?
Good, that's it.
This is Dr. Goldsmith.
I'm frequently called with
Well,
problems
tell me
or
what
with
questions you have.
questions about laboratory results as well as the interpretation of particular results. So I serve as a consultant to the physician for these problems, particularly in pediatrics, where it is often difficult because the reference ranges or normal ranges for many of these analytes or the tests that we do have not been well established. One is asked whether or not a result is truly normal or abnormal.
Randy has been on cyclosporin for several days, but he is not doing well. His cyclosporin level is much too high. The surgeon, Dr. Stephen Dunn, needs to find out why.
Deborah, I just received a call from Dr. Dunn. He questioned the cyclosporin results on Randy Klosek. Did you have any problems with the run today?
No, I was just looking at it now, and the standard curve looks real good. All the CVs are less than 1%. The graph looks fine.
Okay, good. If there are no problems, I'll call Dr. Dunn and let him know that. Thank you.
Dr. Dunn tells the family that he's decided to put Randy on a new immunosuppressant drug. As with cyclosporin, its levels must be closely monitored. But there's no assay at the hospital to do that. He seeks out Dr. Barbara Goldsmith.
And I'd like to treat him with FK, but I'd like to be able to monitor it at St. Chris so we could have a rapid turnaround on the results and make changes that would really help him.
Yes, Steve, I think that would be possible. We'll first have to contact the manufacturer, bring in some of the assays, develop the assay in-house, evaluate it, and once our technologists have adequate experience with it, we'll be able to offer the test for you and give you same-day turnaround time of results. The interaction with Dr. Dunn is certainly a very typical example of how the clinical chemist helps the physician. You really work as a team. The physician has a problem, comes to the clinical chemist, you discuss the problem and come up with a solution to the problem. So you really feel that you're contributing to the health and well-being of your patient.
This is going to get a complete tracing so we could tell if there was any damage to any part of his heart.
In the emergency room, the team continues to work on Von Morrison. His EKG is inconclusive. The blood tests will give the answer.
Looks as if this patient has had an MI. Why don't you verify those and send them down to the printer in the ER?
Okay.
Thanks.
Hello. Hi, it's Zach Casuto.
This is Larry Krishker in clinical chemistry. We have the stat CK results on your patient, Mr. Morrison.
Okay, so they were both elevated.
Yes, we'll analyze the serial samples and see what the results are like on those. What gives me greatest satisfaction in this field is knowing that the results of our tests are used to diagnose disease and also help to manage disease and play an important role in helping to cure sick patients and make them well again.
Hey, Mr. Morrison.
Yeah.
I just got a call from the lab. Okay, and the lab confirms what I was worried about to begin with, that you may have had a heart attack. It looks that way. Yeah.
Today, but I do have some results that you asked about. I was coming to show them to you.
Good.
The results of the triple screen run on Jennifer Bryan's blood showed a lowered AFP level and an elevated HCG level. Dr. O'Neill recognized that this combination of results indicates a possibly endangered pregnancy. He decided to analyze the degree of risk and shares the results with geneticist Hope Panett.
I wanted to get your reaction to those.
Well, it certainly increases her risk threefold, so I think I better get in touch with her right away. She was very concerned. And then I'll let you know whether or not she decides to have an amniocentesis.
As a laboratorian, we contribute information about the makeup of the sample. A geneticist understands a different body of knowledge that applies to the situation. An obstetrician, gynecologist would have a different set of information. And we all need to share our information and share our expertise in the patient's best interest.
In response to Dr. Dunn's request, the assay to monitor Randy Klosek's new immunosuppressant drug is up and running. Turnaround time is just 1 day. Barbara Goldsmith has brought in the assay and trained the technologists in its use.
Control results?
They're fine.
They are? Okay. Do you have any patients from Dr. Dunn today?
Yes,
any
I do.
specimens?
Okay.
Could you please call them to him right away so that he can have those results and treat his patient?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
The levels are good. The new drug is working, and Randy should be improving soon. In the daily lives of clinical chemists, the clinical work is just one focal point. Clinical chemists often teach medical students, medical technology students, and residents in pathology and laboratory medicine. Clinical chemists often supervise graduate students and serve as mentors.
There's some certain papers that I pulled out from the literature that I'd like you to read so that you can start developing these assays. And I'll help you.
What kind of enzyme are we interested in?
We'll look at two enzymes to begin with, glutathione peroxidase and superoxide dismutase.
And there are other responsibilities.
I'm a manager. I prepare budgets. I counsel personnel. I develop 5-year, 10-year plans, strategic plans for the laboratory. I recommend instrumentation and submit capital requests for instrumentation. I serve on various committees throughout the hospital.
A good clinical chemist has a kaleidoscope of creative qualities.
Overall, I would say that it has to be someone who's inquisitive, who likes to figure out how things work and piece puzzles together and take the various parts and build them into a whole. And it will certainly need to be someone who's flexible.
Someone who's flexible, because the field of clinical chemistry has such enormous scope and incorporates so many different disciplines. Immunology, molecular biology, molecular genetics, biochemistry, toxicology, therapeutic drug monitoring, general chemistry, DNA work, computer science. All this expertise can be brought to bear on clinical laboratory diagnosis, and not just in the laboratory. There is extraordinary diversity within clinical chemistry. Many chemists work in the diagnostics industry, overseeing clinical trials and developing and manufacturing tests, where knowledge of systems integration is crucial. Clinical chemists work in the pharmaceutical industry, doing research and development, in commercial reference laboratories, in space at NASA, even in the area of government regulations. This is Wendell O'Neill's specialty.
The interaction between clinical laboratorians and governments at all levels have become increasingly important in recent years, driven by a couple of fundamental concerns. The role of government in assuring consistency of quality, assuring that lab tests, wherever done and by whomever they are done, are of some acceptable level of quality. In today's economic environment, of course, it's also important to do what we can to assure that for the dollars spent, we get the most benefit.
Another focus for clinical chemists is research.
Many clinical chemists are interested in research and in developing new and better tests, tests that are more sensitive, more specific, are easier to do, cost less to do.
One of Larry Krishka's research projects involves development of ultra-sensitive methods to detect as few as 100 molecules in a sample. The method uses chemiluminescence.
Immunoassays, and I'm going to break this now and show you an example of a chemiluminescent reaction. If I shake this up, you can see that there is an intense light emitted, and reactions like this are now used routinely in clinical laboratories for analytical purposes.
Behind the research, behind the technology and the science, there is always the patient.
We always realize on a daily basis that behind every one of those samples, there's a person, and that person has a life. That person has a family, that person has a history, that person makes contributions to the world and wants to enjoy life. And we want to contribute what we can from our perspective to the betterment of that life.
Helping to make lives better. That's an important goal of the clinical chemist.
Who's joyously whistling that song about not worrying.
Vaughn Morrison is recovering from his heart attack and soon will return home.
Mrs. Bryan, I'm so glad to see you here today. We have the results of your amniocentesis, and the chromosomes are normal.
Jennifer Bryan can now enjoy the rest of her pregnancy.
Would you like to know the sex of the baby?
Yes, I would.
Well, you're going to have a little girl. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Randy Klosek's new liver is working well. He is now an active and energetic baby.
So I think he's showing an excellent response to his transplant.
This is why clinical chemists enter the field, and this is why they stay.